Well, in typical Fanstoys fashion, in typical Fanstoys fashion, they've managed to tease another product that has turned into a shot heard around the world. But this one has caused a bit more controversy than I'm used to seeing in regards to Fanstoys dropping a release. So let's talk about what we saw. And I know this may come as a surprise to some of you, but I've been made aware of it. And I only say that because I think 1,000 people sent me pictures of this thing to make sure that I had seen it. And while I appreciate your concern, I've seen it. Thank you. I've got it. I'm good. Thank you for caring, though. Let's continue. So we got images of Breakdown and Wild Rider from their Stunticon line. Now, we're going to be having a sit-down Saturday here about Fanstoys very shortly. So I don't want to get off topic. I want to remain on topic, which is this specific release. What do we think about it? What do we see, etc.? We'll talk about Fanstoys tactics here very soon. Maybe this week. Spoilers! So, what do we see? We see Breakdown, and I think he looks absolutely amazing. One of the things that I commend Fanstoys for above all is sculpt. They know how to sculpt a figure. And while they've kind of gotten on board with this modern masterpiece, hyper cartoon accuracy, they still manage to sneak in a few extra details to make it look a little bit more modern, a little bit more mature, and a little bit more professional, in my opinion. And I love seeing that. Looking at the Breakdown, I love seeing it in all the kind of circuitry in the chest, the panel lines around the sides of the blue aspects of the chest. Those sorts of details help really drive a figure into a different pocket for me. I can't explain it other than that. Sculpt and presentation is not Fanstoys' issue. Fanstoys has an issue with engineering and making the process fun and enjoyable. That's where they need to be focusing on. But this thing looks amazing. I feel like their head sculpts have never been better. Like within the last year, every head sculpt that we've seen from them just looks better and better and better. It looks perfect to me. The same with this Wild Rider. I love a lot of the details around the lower legs and in the chest area. It has a way of looking cartoon accurate and still looking like something professional, not looking like a cartoon. It looks like what it would be if it were real based on the cartoon. And that's what I like about it. That's what I like about most of their products, to be honest. It is a little bit of a bummer of choice in the sense that we already have two other companies offering masterpiece scaled Stunticons, whereas I feel like I would have been much more excited had it been the Protectobots or even the Technobots. Ooh, what about a Terracon set or a Predacon set? That probably would have sent me over into the crazy house. I might have lost my mind. But the Stunticons are my favorite team, so I'm happy to see them regardless. The alt modes look spot on. Now, one thing I think we need to look at here is that we're seeing prototypes of the bots, but we're seeing renders of the vehicles, which makes me think that this thing may still be a far cry out from being complete, where they couldn't get a prototype into car mode for the pictures because it may not stand that test at the moment, which would just suggest to me that this thing was still a far cry ready from being released. And we're going to be talking about elements of that on Saturday, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. But I think the car modes look great. We'll talk about them in comparison to the X-Transbots and the DX9, and we're just going to compare the Breakdown because that's all we really know at this point from all three. And I think that sculpt-wise, it looks better than all three. I think it's going to be very challenging for DX9 to compete with Fanstoys unless they start pumping out this product, because I would imagine these Fanstoys bots are still a far way away. DX9 has been absolutely killing it recently with the engineering, which is where I think that they'll surpass the Fanstoys effort, but they have a hard time competing with Fanstoys Sculpt. Now, X-Transbots has been competing with Fanstoys Sculpt for some time. Where X-Transbots has been failing is in engineering and materials, but this Breakdown was a step above for them. So Fanstoys might have a hard time competing with X-Transbots, especially at the X-Transbots price point. So that's an interesting element to this competition that we haven't quite seen before from these companies. A different dynamic than we're used to. But I think the big element here that's causing the division amongst people is the size. So let's talk about it. Now, we know that the X-Transbots Menasor is going to be shorter than the DX9 Menasor. We also know that the DX9 Menasor is going to be shorter than the Toy World and Zeta efforts, but it's closer than the X-Transbots is going to be. So where are the differences? A lot of people are complaining that this Fanstoys one is too big. I feel like they're hyper complaining, where I didn't feel like they were complaining as much about the DX9 effort. So I wonder if there isn't a little bit of personal malcontent with Fanstoys from these folks. So let's talk about size. They're obviously a chest and a head bigger than the MP Carbots, which puts them about the same size as an MP Seeker. Now, what do we know about that? Well, for one, we know that the DX9 Montana is about in the same same boat. Not quite as big, but just about. We also know that the Zeta bots are about that size. The Zeta bots are just about the same size as a Seeker and a fair bit bigger than the MP cars, which would mean that the FT Stunticons, and I would assume the FT aerial bots, are going to be about the same size as the Zeta, which tells us what? It's a good chance that the combiner will be in scale with the Zetas, which to me is well worth the cost of admission for having a bigger bot. I know now more than ever that size that Unique Toys sort of locked down with their Bruticus is just not for me. And while that Bruticus is a solid combiner, I don't think that it holds up size-wise next to Devastator in one slight iota. And I hate the arm bots, but I'm tired of beating that dead horse. So I think we all need to take a minute and think about what the size really means. And then we need to talk about, is the juice worth the squeeze? For me, I'm okay with having all of the combiner bots larger than the MP car bots if it means that we get combiners that are as intimidating and impressive as that Toy World Devi. If you don't like the scale of that Toy World Devi, then you probably want to avoid this pocket, because it would seem to me that that's the angle they're going for, which I think is the right choice. Now, you can also make the argument that the MP car bots are too small, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree. As I've said 1,000 times over and over again, scale is in the eye of the beholder, and it really is a matter of what feels right to you as a collector and what feels right to you on your shelf. I'm 100% okay with the X-Transbot size, but also these arm bots at different sizes doesn't bother me in the least. And I don't feel like I ever saw Starscream towering over the Combaticons or the Stunticons like he would to the MP car scale. In the opening footage of the theme music to the very first season, we see that Jazz is only a head shorter than Skywarp, and we also see the Sideswipe is about the same size as Starscream. So it's all over the place. It only comes down to how you feel about it personally. And for me, the advantage of getting a combiner to be as intimidating and impressive as this larger scale is well worth it for me to have bots that are bigger. I think that we also have to take in our shelves into consideration with this sort of stuff. I think if you're displaying MP car bots right alongside the Stunticons, then that may look more ridiculous. And that's a valid concern to have as a collector. But if you'll be displaying them on separate shelves, I don't think it'll ultimately bother you, which is an interesting thing to think about, how the display element affects appropriateness of scale. I don't think that we always consider it. It's the same thing, like the car bots are far shorter than the Seekers than they were in the cartoon most of the time. But since my car bots are 2 shelves away from my Seekers, it never bothers me in the least. But I am interested to see the amount of pushback on the Fanstoys size for the Stunticons in comparison to what we saw for the DX9 Stunticons. And I know the fandom is a fickle beast. For years, people complained that I blindly followed Fanstoys in every release they ever put out, even though I was critical of other releases prior to the big moment where I was really disappointed in a Fanstoys release. But once I criticized that Fanstoys release, I was called everything but an objective reviewer. So I know how fickle the fandom can be. But that being said, one thing I've been consistent on since putting together the Toy World Constructor is that this is how I want my combiners to look. And if that means that the car bots have to be bigger, then guess what? Give me bigger car bots. But if you don't feel that way, it may not make sense. Plus, we have to think about price. It looks like X-Transbots is going to be offering the lowest price, and they're pumping out a high quality product for that price so far. Or you could be like me and get all 3 because I'm an idiot and I have zero self-control. But anyway, I think these look great. I'm super excited about future releases from Fanstoys, but we need to have a discussion about Fanstoys and their release schedules, which might be this Saturday. I'll see you then. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.